So my name is Deborah Lawton. I'm a therapist and the National Clinical Training and Education Manager at Sandstone Care. I'm so glad you're joining us today. Welcome. In case you're not already familiar with Sandstone Care, we provide a full continuum of care for mental health, substance use, and dual diagnosis treatment for teens and young adults. So we serve ages 13 through 30, and then we also provide detox for adults ages 18 and up. So our continuum includes teen and young adult residential care for mental health and dual diagnosis or primary substance use, as well as IOP and PHP, detox, transitional living, and then uh, alumni care. We have locations throughout Maryland, Virginia, and Colorado, and we are in network with most major insurance carriers. Happy to talk more offline about your services and needs. And now, without further ado, I'm excited to bring you Lynn Louise Wonders on supporting middle and high school students with school avoiding behavior. I hope it's helpful for your work. All right, Lynn, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Good morning. I was just looking at the chat and seeing everyone hailing from all over the country. My goodness, my goodness. How exciting is this? I have to tell you guys, I have been training, teaching for many, many years, and I have never had this many people in a room at one time. So this is like really exciting to me. I can feel the energy. Even though I can't see your beautiful faces, I can feel you. And I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. I am going to share my screen. We're going to get started. I'm going to show you my PowerPoint. Let me just tell you that this morning, as I usually do, I was going through my slides and I discovered that I wanted to add a couple of extra slides in there. Don't panic if you notice that there's an extra slide in there. If you need an updated slide deck, you can get it afterwards. It's just because I got excited and wanting to add a little bit more information in here in a couple little places. So this is supporting middle and high school students with avoiding behaviors. I'm very happy to be presenting this information to you today. Let me introduce myself. I'm Lynn Louise Wonders. I am licensed and certified in the state of Georgia as a professional counselor and supervisor. I'm also a registered play therapist supervisor. And I have been providing play therapy training, all kinds of continuing education training, a lot about working with kids and families through the use of play therapy. And I've been providing supervision in that realm and consultation for therapists worldwide since 2010. So I've been doing this quite a while. I have my websites up here in case you want to get in touch with me afterwards. My main company is Wonders Counseling, and then I have a subsidiary institute called mindfulness-based therapy training.com. We have a faculty of over 20 instructors, and we're doing some really great things with mindfulness-based therapy there if you're interested. Without further ado, let's talk about you. So here we are. We have a slide here that should cue our moderator for a poll, because I would like to hear from you. I would like to know, where do you primarily practice? Are you in a clinical setting? Are you in a school setting, or something otherwise? If you would answer that poll, we'll get the results up here and we'll be able to see. So I'm seeing the poll question. Do I just close this out, Tony?
You can close out the poll question.
Okay.
Once we end the poll, we'll put the results up and you'll see everyone's
Okay.
answers.
So while you guys are answering that, thank you. I want to just say that for a minute, I want to take the focus off of me and put the focus on you. Because whether you are a therapist of some kind, whether you are a social worker, which means you also may be a therapist, or you're a school social worker, or you're a counselor, a licensed counselor, or a school counselor, you are a big deal. You are on the front line for these students, for these children, for these kids that we are talking about today. And in answer to our poll, we have about 46% of people present today, which I understand we have over 1,000 people present. 46% of you are working in clinical settings. 34% of you are in school settings and 20% in another kind of setting. Very nice. So we've got a nice distribution, a variety, and I wanted to know that just so that we know who we are here together collectively, and so that I know who I'm talking to. So regardless of the setting that you work in, you are oftentimes a sort of a first responder when a student, a child, a middle schooler, high schooler is showing signs of emotional and mental challenges, or or showing behavioral expressions of such mental and emotional challenges. Middle and high school students ideally benefit from having a psychotherapeutic intervention, psychotherapy services in a clinical setting, but how we interact with them in the school setting is very important. So we're going to be talking today about things that you can do in your clinical settings and in your school settings to support these students. But ultimately, I want to honor and respect the fact that you are the ones that are actually doing the work. And we, as clinicians, as school-based staff, have to work together. One of the things, I don't know if Tony has already told you or not, is that if you have any questions, I want you to pop them in wherever they need to go, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. That's going to allow me to be able to stay in a flow of presenting the material. I welcome and invite you to ask questions. Just know that I will get to your questions later. Make sure you're very specific about what you're asking about, because if you ask it about slide number 3 and I don't get to it to the end, might not know what you're talking about. So make sure you're specific. Okay. So middle and high school students often ideally benefit from having clinical services with a therapist outside of school, but sometimes the families of the students don't have the resources or the ability to get their child into private therapy. So a lot of times the only time they're going to get support is going to be in the school setting, from the school counselors, from the school social workers. So we have to work together as a team. So I think it's beautiful that we're all in here together and we're working in different settings to understand each other, to understand what we're doing. Sometimes clinicians, you, by learning about these interventions that I'm going to talk about that can be done in the school setting, you can take from this training and then make recommendations respectfully to your team members for the student, which are the people that are working in the school setting. Likewise, if you're in a school setting and you learn something about an intervention that could be used in the therapy room outside of school, and you're working as a team with the child's therapist, you can make a suggestion respectfully that they maybe think about this, that you learned this in a training. So let's do this together. You are a big deal. You are doing such vitally important work. And I just wanted to take this time to honor you and thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being on the front line, for doing the work that you're doing. I know sometimes it feels like thankless work. This is your thank you. I appreciate you. I see you and I honor you. All right. Today's schedule is going to roughly be about an hour about talking about all of the backbone of what school avoidance is and why school avoidance happens. The second part of our training today is going to be, what do we do about it? Addressing interventions, how we're going to plan for it, how we're going to work together. So take notes. I promise you the notes that you take from this training are going to be notes that you will go back to again and again, because this topic we're talking about today is one of the most stumping, frustrating, challenging things we can deal with. And so we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of this. Listen, I'll try to make it as lively and interesting for you as possible. Ask the questions and we will get to questions and answers towards the end. All right, school avoidance, it says, or school avoidance, that's because I did a substitute for the word school refusal. It's supposed to say school refusal or school avoidance is not a disorder or a diagnosis. Now, throughout the training today, I'm going to be using the terminology school avoidance. Previously, and when I did this training before, we were still using the term school refusal. And that's because there's history, how things evolve and change. But whether you're calling it school refusal or school avoidance, what's important to realize is this is not a disorder in and of itself. It is not a diagnosis. It is a set of behaviors. It's a symptom that is indicating there's something very substantial going on for the student internally and perhaps in their external environment, in their home or in the school setting or in their social settings. There's something going on. It's a pointer to something else. Now, as often is the case for those of us who work in the field of mental health, we are helping children and oftentimes helping their caregivers, their family systems to resolve the underlying issues of the externalizing behavior. And so this training is going to talk about that. We're going to be addressing strategies for clinicians in therapy settings, for school counselors, social workers in the school settings to use for identifying what's going on and supporting students, not only with their externalized behavior, the school avoidance, but what's going on under the surface. And hopefully we'll have a chance to support their caregivers, parents, as part of the team if we're lucky enough to get to do that. At the end of this training, I want you to be able to list at least 3 possible underlying causes. And trust me, we're going to go way over 3. I want you to be able to identify at least 8 strategies that you can utilize with your young clients, your students in middle and high school who are having this school avoidant behavior. And you will be well equipped to develop a treatment plan. Now, we're not going to do a treatment plan today because we're not going to have time for that, but you're going to have all the information you need to be able to set goals, objectives, pick your interventions and know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it. You're going to have a great conceptualization of this whole topic today. Used to be called school refusal. Today we're calling it school avoidance or school avoidant. Sometimes called school avoidance or school refusal. It occurs when a child regularly resists attending school or struggles to remain in school for the full day. This behavior might begin gradually, might be skipping an occasional day that turns into more and more days, or it could be that they're showing stress at home on Sundays, anticipating going to school on Monday morning. They might, it says pretending to be sick, but they might actually be having some psychosomatic symptoms, which is not pretend. They're actually having some symptoms that are connected to what's happening in their mind and in their nervous systems. And then it can develop into a habit, a pattern of behavior that is very difficult to manage. Now, in research that was published way back in 2008, 80% of the absences from school were clocked to be based in legitimate causes: illness, family travel, injury, emergency. 20% at that time were considered to be school refusers, or these are children who are having school avoidant behavior, where they were driven by no actual reason that we could account for, no external reason. Okay, so the term school avoidance behavior is that continuum of behaviors that ranges, and it does range from a child who is resisting but still attends school because they're told you have to go and they go because they're told they have to go, all the way to the other end of the continuum where they're completely absent from school for an extended period of time. The term school avoidance was originally the term school refusal, was coined to describe a pattern of behaviors to be addressed without, and this is really important, without over pathologizing the behavior itself. Now, we are going to understand some, quote, pathology, some mental health diagnoses and information that may be the underlying reason. But we don't want to overemphasize the actual refusing behavior as pathology itself. It's simply a symptom pointing to something else that we need to address. Okay, so again, it's the consistent act of a child or a teen trying to escape attending school. It's very different from truancy. Truancy is a deliberate behavior, but school avoidance is a set of symptoms of an underlying mental health situation. So it could be a full-blown diagnosis, or could be something that's just, indicators they're showing something's out of balance with regard to the emotional and mental well-being of the child or the teenager. While some kids will complain about school, a lot of kids will complain about school, let's be real, right? They might drag their feet and they might, complain and say, mornings might be frustrating for parents at home. That's not necessarily school avoidance. That can be just like normal adolescence, right? For some students, the issue goes much deeper and oftentimes requires specialized treatment, which is why we are all here together today. So these students who are refusing to attend school will often go to great lengths to avoid having to go. And it's because of what's going on in their nervous systems. And we're going to do a little bit of brain science information here very quickly. or very soon. All right, first, let's talk a little bit about the historical context about school avoidance. Like, where in the world did this come from? Well, back in the 1940s, it's always nice to have a little history, right? Back in the 1940s, it was called school phobia, and it was recognized as a phobia with obsessive tendencies. That was back in 1941 by a study of done by Johnson et al. So school phobia was described as a fear-based avoidance to go to school that was connected to some experience affiliated with attending school. So it was more specific to whatever was happening at school. All right. Some cases involved a child having an intense fear of separating from a parent even before the school year began. In those early years, there were thought to be 3 elements of school phobia. One, an exhibit of fearful behavior, along with what they used to call hypochondria and clinging dependently to caregivers. Number 2, the child's primary caregiver exhibiting high anxiety. And 3, an overly dependent relationship, or what we now call an enmeshed relationship between the child and the primary caregiver. And that is often still the case in younger children. But we're here to talk about middle and high school kids, and it's like, well, whoa, is that still going on? Not necessarily. Let's get into that a little further. All right, according to we have a lot of research in the literature done by Kearney and various other researchers back in the early 2000s, and this is from a study that was published in 2007. Still relevant, but always evolving, and we're going to get into the most modern stuff here. But this is well worth looking at. So what they determined is that there are 4 core functions behind school refusal or school avoidant behavior. Number 1, they identified as the avoidance of the negative affect or negative emotions or anxiety triggers. So the child avoids going to school to escape distress, or the school setting is linked to strong emotional discomfort. Okay, so that's the number 1, is avoiding having those negative feelings that they have affiliated with being at school. Number 2, escaping from aversive social or evaluative situations. So this is the fear of being judged, the fear of being judged by teachers, by peers. Maybe it's the fear of dropping their tray in the cafeteria. Maybe it's the fear of being called on in math class. Anybody relate to this? I can relate to that. I had that. I didn't avoid school because of it, but maybe I would have if I had been able to do that. It might be the fear of giving presentations in class or of being called on. I'm working with an adult client right now who's in law school, and she's dealing with this right now because she just has a terror of being called on by this professor. It's really interesting. So a lot of our teens are having this experience. Under number 2, it's also like the avoidance is serving to reduce that short-term anxiety, and it's tied to being evaluated, having their performance evaluated, test anxiety, for example. All right, number 3, it can be attention seeking. This is something a lot of people don't realize. Attention seeking or maintaining their parental contact. So this is where there may be some extended separation anxiety. We can have adolescents who are suffering with separation anxiety disorder. It's not common, but it can persist from early childhood into adolescence if it wasn't addressed earlier on. So in this case, we might see that the avoidance of going to school is reinforced by getting to spend extra time with the caregiver or getting comforted by the parent or the caregiver. So you see, this is one of the reasons that we need to work as a team, as if at all possible, with the caregivers. We often see this in younger or more dependent children. Okay, and then number 4, it might be that there's a pursuit of tangible rewards outside of school. So the avoidance might be that the child is getting to do things that are more fun because they're not at school. Maybe they're getting to stay home and play video games. Maybe they're getting to stay home and sleep in. Maybe they're getting to watch their favorite show. It can indicate underlying oppositional or motivational patterns rather than pure anxiety. So we're going to be talking a lot about the anxiety underlying, but do know that in some cases, the environmental factors and the caregivers, maybe the caregivers are going to work and the child is skipping school, and that skipping school is being reinforced by the fact that they're getting to do something that's more fun while they're at home. That would need to be addressed, right? That's where we come in working as a team. All right, we've got chronic and we've got acute school avoidant behavior or school refusal behavior. All right, so acute school avoidance usually lasts 2 weeks or less. It's a short-term thing. It's usually triggered by a specific event like the death of a loved one or a pet, or maybe some shorter-term bullying experience, or maybe there's a specific project going on at school. Let's say they're dissecting frogs in their biology class and they are just horrified by that. They might have some school avoidant behavior on that acute level because there's something specific and short-term that's happening, right? Now, if you notice this, you do want to catch it as quickly as possible, because if you don't, it could become a chronic problem, right? So before identifying it as acute, we're looking at focusing on increasing the incentives for staying in school all day or coming to school. So we want to give them a positive experience of feeling welcome, feeling like they can get some relief from whatever it is that they're worried about experiencing while they're at school. We want to make sure that we're validating their distress. Let's use the example of dissecting frogs in biology class. We can validate that feels really icky to you. It feels really scary to you. It's bringing up all kinds of big feelings for you, and you don't want to feel those feelings. I get it. We want to make sure that they're feeling validated, not invalidated, not minimized. Also, we want to encourage expression of the feelings about the triggering event. This helps to move that emotional energy, if you will. It will help them to kind of process that through. And we also can teach some skills for stress management and self-regulation. And oftentimes that will nip it in the bud. However, chronic school avoidance, this will persist beyond a few weeks, often linked to underlying mental health conditions, which we're going to get into. It's frequently intertwined with learning issues or neurodevelopment disorders. We're going to go more into that in a minute. They may feel a sense of feeling different or feeling less capable than their peers. And that is the worst feeling that an adolescent can experience, to feel like they don't belong, they don't fit in, there's something weird about them. As a weirdo myself in high school, I can tell you it is a terrible feeling. And if anybody out there can relate, you can raise your hand. I won't be able to see you, but I feel you. We're here and we're in this together. So we can remember what it felt like, or we can imagine what it feels like as an adult in this student's life, so that we can be there for them in a way that's very empathetic. So what are we going to do? Empathy. We're going to have active intervention with mental health treatment. And there's things that can be done in the school setting, and there's things that can be done over here in the therapy room that we're going to get into in our second half of this training today. So here's just a few examples on the slide. I'm not going to read them right now because we're going to be going into that in more detail in the second half. This is just a cute little chart that I like, that kind of helps you decide and you to be able to see, is this an acute school avoidance situation, or is this a chronic school avoidance situation? So we've got this nice little chart here that talks about how long it lasts, the triggers, the student experience, what their primary need is, and some of the best interventions, and then what the goal ultimately is. So you've got this in your slides. I encourage you to take the slides that I've sent you, do some screenshots of some of these things, put them in your photo album so you'll have them later to look at when you are wondering what's going on with a particular client or student. Now, let's take a quick look at what is happening with children who are in middle and high school developmentally. Cognitive and emotional development. This is where they are beginning to have an increased sense of awareness about themselves, a heightened sensitivity as a result to being embarrassed, to failing at something. They are really beginning to develop the ability to have abstract thinking. We're going to get into the brain science, but this prefrontal cortex is really starting to develop, and they're starting to really have a more advanced ability to think abstractly. But what comes with that is more capacity for worry and rumination. So there's a two-sided coin there. We got the blessing of the developing critical mind, but we've got the curse of an ability to really let that roll away from us and a snowball effect. Okay, these kids are also struggling to find balance between being autonomous and independent and still being dependent on the adults in their lives. right? So there's a balancing act that they're going through. Now, socially, in terms of their development, peer acceptance is their most important focus. We got to remember this as adults who used to be adolescents. We got to remember what that was like. And so we don't want to like, invalidate that or dismiss that experience because it's what's most important to them right now. We may see from our perspective that that's not going to matter to you when you're 40 years old, but right now that really matters to them, and we've got to meet them where they are. Fear of judgment or exclusion can intensify experiences of anxiety about school. I mean, let's think about it for a second. This student is going to a big building most of the time with lots of other kids around their same age from all walks of life and a lot of adults milling around. And there's that fear of, am I going to fit in? Are people going to make fun of me? Are people going to find out that there's something different about me? I have to wear glasses. Are they going to call me Four Eyes? I have this going on. I look different than they do. All of that really gets amplified at this stage. And social media is making this a lot worse for these kids. It's amplifying comparisonitis and peer stress. It's a reality of the world we live in. So let's be sensitive to that and keep that in mind. In their academic and performance area of development, the transitions to more demanding coursework in middle school and high school from elementary school or from middle school into high school, that can be a difficult transition. There's higher expectations. Teachers expect them to be responsible where they've never been expected to be responsible before. It's a tough transition for these kids. A lot of times they have fear of making bad grades, they have test anxiety, and that can be very triggering. They also have tendency sometimes, some of them, to be perfectionistic. And there are often executive functioning challenges for a lot of these kids with regard to their ability to organize, with their ability to plan. Maybe they have some time blindness going on. Maybe they feel overwhelmed in terms of their cognitions and their brain's processing. In their family and their identity dynamics, there's a lot going on. There's a desire for independence, but that often clashes with what their parents are doing with them. So a lot of times there's tension between parents and teens at this age. There's a lot of identity exploration happening for them at this stage, like who am I? Where am I from? What group do I belong to? Which groups do I not belong with? And this can create some internal conflict and therefore mood instability. There can be family stress, there can be family conflict going on that can heighten some of the school avoidant behavior that we're seeing. And then with regard to mental health vulnerabilities, this is an onset period for anxiety disorders, depression, and social phobia. A lot of times, human beings who did really great in elementary school suddenly land in middle school, and it all starts. And sometimes when they go from middle school to high school, maybe that's what triggers it. So mental health issues often begin where you are, where you're seeing them. And so we got to be the first ones on the front line to identify it so we can get them the support that they need. So this school avoidance behavior is giving them short-term relief to whatever's going on, and it's actually maintaining a cycle of anxiety. Now, like I said, there's a few cases where it's not about anxiety. It might be about the fact that they just would rather be home doing video games. That's a whole other thing. But for the most part, we're going to talk today about the ones who are having anxiety. Okay, this is a list of what parents might see at home. So let me encourage you as clinicians and school-based workers with these students. Take this information, create a flyer, put it into the orientation packet for parents. Go ahead and be proactive. Talk about it in the orientation meeting that parents are attending. Send it home, put it up on the website, for the school website. Make this readily available. Put it on your school social media, wherever the parents are going to get their information, those portals and things that they use these days. I haven't been in one of those in a long time. My kids are all adults now. But make this information available. These are the possible signs of school avoidance that the parents might be seeing from home. I'm not going to read all of these. You've got this. Screenshot it, copy paste it, do whatever you need to do. But make sure you're getting this information out to parents proactively. That's going to help your job not to be quite so hard if we can help the parents to catch it early on. Now, this is what you're going to see in terms of the school avoidant behavioral indications at school. So frequent tardiness, obviously, a lot of absences, getting out from school early dismissals frequently. So be in touch with your front office. See what's going on from that perspective. Be in touch with the teachers. Be a team. Make sure that y'all are all knowing what behaviors to spot. Take this list and make this available to your front staff, to your teachers, to everybody that's working the school. Let's be a team. Clinicians, you can give this to the schools that you work with. You know, there's lots of ways you can do this. So there's emotional and social indicators here. There's some academic indicators, and there's some communication cues on this list. I'm not going to read through all of these. You can read for yourself, but this is important information to have because we need to be able to spot it. We want to spot this as early as possible so that we can know, and then we're going to figure out what's going on for them, and then we're going to figure out what we do about it. Okay, real quickly, I'm going to give you a crash course in some neuroscience. You may have already know this. Have your beginner's mind in place. Okay, pretend like you don't know anything about brain science. You may learn something new today. Prefrontal cortex, still maturing. It's still maturing through the mid-20s. This is the part of the brain, it's the upper brain, it's the last part of the brain to develop. It's responsible for executive functioning, which includes impulse control, ability to plan, ability to regulate time, to be able to regulate emotion, to be able to, discern what's the good judgment. What's a good judgment in this situation? What would be a healthy decision for myself to make? That's your prefrontal cortex. And teenagers, it's still developing, and it's going to still be developing until they get to be about 25 years old. And that's if they don't participate in substance abuse during their high school years. Because if they do that, it's going to delay the process of their prefrontal cortex development. All right, the amygdala. It is a part of the brain in the limbic brain. This is the emotional brain, and the amygdala is like the alarm. It's highly active in adolescence. It drives fear, it's a threat detector, and it's an emotional reactor. I just think of the amygdala as like this, like, and it sends signals to the rest of the nervous system, which then tells the muscles, the heart, the digestive system, the whole body to have a reaction because it perceives that there's a threat. It's saying threat, 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 okay? And in adolescence, that amygdala is very overactive because this part of the brain hasn't come fully developed, and because there's a lot of stress with being a teenager. So the stress feels like threat to the nervous system. So the nervous system starts reacting a lot to a lot of things. Their bodies are changing, their hormones are raging, their parents are yelling at them, the teachers are expecting so much of them. Maybe they have neurodivergence happening and they don't understand why they can't, remember where anything is in their backpack and their desk. All of this stress is contributing to an overactive amygdala. So there's an imbalance here. Also, the brain's dopamine circuitry is hypersensitive in adolescence. And this is going to make their pursuit of being approved of by their peers all the more important. They need to feel like they look good. They need to feel like they're accepted. All of that is happening in the background of the brains of these teenagers. Now, the stress response in that autonomic nervous system, we've heard about this. And again, this is a crash course, you guys. I could teach this for days on end and never get to the full extent. So I'm having to give this to you in a little tiny thing here. But we see the fight or flight or freeze responses, the stress responses. We see those triggered when that amygdala perceives threat. And then we have what's called the sympathetic activation. This is the increase of the heart rate, the stomach upset, the shakiness, the sweating, right? This is all symptoms that are common for our students that are experiencing anxiety. And then we also have the parasympathetic shutdown. This is when they just go into freeze. They go into freeze mode. They become immobile. They're numb, and they're withdrawing emotionally. So when the nervous system is repeatedly activated in this way, the child is experiencing chronic dysregulation. And this is going to reinforce their desire to avoid whatever it is that is causing or triggering all of these very uncomfortable experiences. Now, neuroplasticity Try saying that 3 times in a row. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change its structure, to form new connections, and to function over time. And it's based on the things we experience, the things we learn. And this is how new patterns are built and old patterns can be unlearned. Okay. Now, avoidance becomes learned through that neuroplasticity. Each time a student stays home from school or escapes the distress that they feel in the classroom, the brain's fear circuits, especially that amygdala we just talked about, and all the little neural pathways connected, gets reinforced. The more it happens, the more it's going to happen. And the brain learns avoiding this situation keeps me safe. And over time, this becomes an automatic conditioned response. And it is very difficult to reverse, but we're here to work on that today. We're going to learn how to do that. So, when a student faces anxiety provoking situations gradually and realizes that they're safe, nothing terrible is happening, we can undo and rewire some of that. And they can learn to feel, I can feel my anxiety and still be okay. And that's part of what we're going to do. And when we help them with this, we are helping them to strengthen that prefrontal cortex ability to regulate the emotions of the limbic brain and reduce that amygdala overactivity. Now, co-regulation is where you come in. So the adolescent nervous system needs safe, attuned adults to help them regulate their stress. That's us, you guys. We have to be the co-regulators we have to let them borrow our nervous systems. And guess what that means? That means we've got to do our own practice. This is why I started mindfulness-based therapy, because I noticed in my supervision and consultation services that therapists and school-based counselors and social workers need to learn how to practice various ways of regulating their nervous system, to practice mindfulness on a regular basis, because we've got to lend our nervous systems to these students. When theirs is feeling dysregulated, we have to go in as a regulated nervous system. So we have to be the supportive counselor, the supportive teacher, the supportive parent, the supportive therapist in a relationship with these students to help their amygdala begin to settle down and strengthen their prefrontal cortex engagement. So we have to be empathic presence. We have to have empathic presence. We have to have mindful presence. We have to provide predictability and routine and calm voices so we can help restore their nervous systems to feeling safe. And once again, realizing that they can be ready for whatever is facing them. All right, let's look at underlying causes of school avoidance and some comorbid diagnoses. Now, this section is kind of long, and I'm looking at my clock, and I want to stay on track. So what I may do is go into some of these, and others I may not go into as much detail. You've got all the information in your slides. Let's take a look at what's happening. First, let's ask ourselves a question. Is it avoidant or is it pursuant? Are they avoiding just to avoid? Sometimes. Are they avoiding to pursue something else? Sometimes. To avoid school-related stimuli or situations that cause that discomfort and anxiety, like the noisy cafeteria, the fear of dropping the cafeteria tray, the crowded hallways, or being taunted by bullies, or difficulty with that math schoolwork, or whatever, or having to dissect frogs in biology class. Maybe it's learning differences. Maybe it's increased academic workload. And then there's to avoid evaluative social situations. Having to get up in front of the class, having to put on a uniform and do PE class, and having to change clothes in the locker room, performing in music class, and so forth. And then there's some pursuant. There's to receive attention from parents or caregivers. This is more related to, like we talked about earlier, separation anxiety because of fears of losing a parent or being away from a parent. Or again, in those cases where they're seeking the more pleasurable they're pursuing, the more pleasurable experience at home. I mean, if you're an adolescent and you got a chance to eat Cheetos and Oreos and watch your favorite television shows and play video games or go to school and learn math and read literature and have to be around a bunch of other people that some of them you don't like, which one are you going to choose? Right? So sometimes they're pursuing something and sometimes they're avoiding. So that's something to consider. All right. The first one we're going to look at is social anxiety, social phobia, because this is a very common one with school avoidance behavior. It's the most common underlying cause, not just one of the most. It is the most. And the avoidance of school is often a function for the student to escape social evaluation, to escape feeling judged, to escape potential embarrassment. It brings temporary relief, and that reinforces the behavior of avoiding school. So you see, when we feel, it's that cycle of anxiety. We feel the anxiety, we avoid the thing that's making us anxious, we get temporary relief, and then it just cycles back around, and we just keep going around in that anxiety cycle loop. So what is happening for these kids internally? They are experiencing hypervigilance. They're constantly scanning for signs of rejection, of criticism, embarrassment, and sometimes they're seeing it when it's not even there. Okay. There's physiological distress, racing heart, nausea, dizziness, shakiness in social or performing situations. Cognitive distortions, that catastrophic thinking like, oh, everyone's going to laugh at me, or I'm going to mess up and I'm going to look stupid in front of everybody, or nobody likes me, everybody hates me. Or maybe it's emotional overload. The anxiety peaks before or during social events, presentations, lunch, group work. These are things to look for. It peaks in middle and high school because of increased self-consciousness due to their developmental stage that we've already addressed, right? They have the developing ability for abstract thought, but that's going to heighten their potential for awareness of their peers' opinions, right? They can imagine things are happening when they're not actually happening because of their abstract thinking. They have expanding social worlds. They have new peer groups. There are cliques. There are social hierarchies in high school and middle school. This intensifies the pressure to fit in and the anxiety of not fitting in. There are higher academic demands. There are new, as we already talked about, identity formation, social media influence. And we can see this when they are avoiding the classes, for example, where standing up in front of the class and giving an oral presentation or oral participation or group interaction are involved. If you have a student that's avoiding just certain classes, skipping certain classes, there's probably something underneath there. Maybe they're seeking isolation during lunch, recess, transitions. There's information there. Maybe they're running to the nurse's office during socially stressful situations and times. Maybe they feel invisible in the class. So school avoidance in socially anxious teens is not defiance. It's an anxiety management strategy. They're doing it to try to manage their anxiety. So in these cases, and we're going to get into this in the second half of our training today, we're looking at gradual exposure, emotional regulation, and school collaboration to rebuild the experience of being able to tolerate the anxiety and have more confidence in doing so. And that's where we're going to come in because we're going to help them with that. We also see generalized anxiety disorder as an underlying cause. This is persistent excessive worry across domains. They're worrying about everything. And school avoidance can become a problem when school is one of their primary sources of worry or is amplifying their anxiety symptoms. So unlike social anxiety, which is focused on being evaluated and judged, generalized anxiety is driven by, or generalized anxiety avoidance is driven by chronic overthinking and anticipatory anxiety, anticipating what may happen, what could happen. Right. So they're caught up in that what if thinking, and they're having somatic symptoms too. A lot of times they're having mental fatigue, difficulty concentrating, because they're so busy in these worry loops. And there's that anticipatory distress. It might peak before school, often the night before school. They're not sleeping well on Sunday nights because they're anticipating having to go to school Monday morning. And then they're going to be really tired if they do go to school, and then they're not going to be able to focus. It's a whole thing. School represents a place with uncontrollable variables. For someone with generalized anxiety disorder, they're feeling out of control in most circumstances, but school is one where you really don't have a lot of control. You're told where to go, when to go there, and you don't get to choose. And you don't get to speak up very often. You have to listen, you have to sit in your seat, you have to do what you're told. And there's a lot of variables happening. You're walking in the hallways, there's a lot of people bumping into each other. There are always bullies, there's cliques, there's all these things. And it just really can be amplified for a child who already has generalized anxiety disorder. So what you might see at school, what the school staff might see is repeated late arrivals, absences after anxious mornings. You might find a pattern of Monday absences, right? Frequent nurse visits, perfectionistic tendencies, excessive reassurance needs. Asking the teacher or the counselors, did I get it right? Am I okay? Am I going to be in trouble? And looking for reassurance a lot. And avoidance of new or unpredictable situations. So key insights for you clinicians who are working in the therapy classroom, you're going to see this control seeking behavior as a way for them to reduce their anxiety. So you, in the therapy room, if you're, for example, I do play therapy, creative activities with my clients, and I use it with all ages. But I might see patterns in the way if they're doing a drawing or a painting activity, or they keep erasing it, or they keep tearing up the page and going over and over again, trying to get it perfect, trying to control the outcome. This is a sign to me of what is happening internally. So with these clients, we're looking at using some good old-fashioned cognitive behavioral therapy. We're looking at gradual exposure, which we'll talk about more later, relaxation and grounding activities, helping them to learn how to regulate their nervous systems on a somatic level, identifying somatic symptoms as a beginning and a gateway into that. And then, of course, always, always teamwork, collaboration with the school staff and with the family, the caregivers, and all of that. Then we have OCD, obsessive thoughts, and then compulsive behaviors that just feel like they have to be done in order to control the obsessive thoughts. And so a lot of times school can trigger the obsessions, and it can interfere with their ability to do their compulsive behaviors, their rituals, which is going to intensify their obsessive thoughts. So they might have recurrent fears of contamination, of catching sickness, of touching things that have germs, or maybe they're obsessing about bad things happening to their family while they're away from their family. And then they might have these compulsive behaviors like checking, cleaning, repeating, mental reviewing, counting. Reassurance seeking can actually be a compulsive behavior. So there's a little overlap there between your generalized anxiety behavior symptoms and your OCD. So basically what's happening here is their nervous system is perceiving threat, and their amygdala misfires, and it's treating the thoughts that they're having as real threats. So they have intolerance of uncertainty. So they feel like they have to create certainty for themselves, and that's where those rituals come in place. So their rituals are time consuming. And so this will a lot of times cause their arrival to school on time to be delayed, because they have to get their rituals in before they can feel safe enough to leave the house. And then again, fear of triggers at school. And then they get exhausted and they feel a sense of shame. It's really, I don't know if you've ever known anybody who has OCD, or if you have OCD, you know that it's a very complex disorder. It affects them on so many different levels. So they fall into that avoidance cycle, so they can feel immediate relief from having to manage their OCD. So here again, I'm not going to read all these because we have a lot to get through, and I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure that we are staying on track. These are some things that the school staff members are going to notice, and then some clinical insights. So these are the things you want to look at depending on who you are on that particular slide. I have a lot of these slides to get through, so I'm not going to read everything from them. I'm just going to touch on each one because we've got a lot of information to go into. And I don't want to cut in too much to the part where we're like, what do you do about it, right? Okay, PTSD, another thing that could be going on. Perhaps the child has experienced a trauma in the past and is having post-traumatic stress disorder. And so when they are having PTSD symptoms, that's going to interfere with their ability to be present in the school setting, in the school classroom, and what's being talked about. And things in the school could actually be triggers for their PTSD episodes. And one of the things right here I just want to point out is dissociation. So we might see emotional numbing, zoning out, and you might think, oh, it's ADHD, but it could be trauma. It could be PTSD. So let's be careful about quick off the cuff diagnosing. Let's remember that diagnostic process is a complex process. And, again, I could do a full 2 weeks training just on that. So it's hard to get all this information in. It was truly, you could take a whole doctoral level, course on this. Here's what school staff might notice. These are just signs that you might see to help you know, is this PTSD? And then, of course, you're going to want to get a clinical assessment on that. And if you're a clinician, these are some of the things to look at, some strategies that you might use in the therapy room to help kids that you have identified who have PTSD. And if we can get some of those resolved, then their school avoidant behavior may change. Then we have our kids who have ADHD. This is a um, a neurotype. It is a disorder according to the DSM, but it's also a whole set of ways that the brain processes information. So there's some executive functioning deficits more than a neurotypical teenager. And as a result, there are some emotional regulation deficit as well. And sometimes there's a lack of motivation because they've had the experience of failing so many times or getting in trouble, for being who they are and for their brain working the way it is, that they just kind of stop trying. We see that a lot. So school avoidance goes hand in hand with that. So their nervous system is just trying to avoid feeling that shame and feeling the boredom or the overstimulation. So sometimes they will avoid going to school as a result. So they also have rejection sensitivity. This is something that comes along with ADHD, which is already a thing for an adolescent as it is, and it's even worse for a kid who has ADHD. So this is really intense emotional pain and sensitivity to perceived failure or perceived rejection, which is already amplified at this age, right? And ADHDers have a dopamine imbalance naturally. So they are going to do things, they're more risky sometimes to try to get that dopamine hit. And sometimes that's skipping classes. And a lot of times they're under a lot of chronic stress and it just wears them down. So there may be task avoidance, low motivation for non-stimulating tasks because it's just not feeding them their dopamine, you guys. They need their dopamine and they're emotionally exhausted. And a lot of times they have comorbid anxiety as a result of all of this. So these are the things that the staff might notice. If you're just identifying that a kid might be an ADHDer, by this time you probably already know that they're an ADHDer. And then here's some clinical insights, just some things that you want to do to make sure you're supporting these students. Then we have our students who are autistic. They may be avoiding school due to sensory overload, social stress, unpredictability, and their exhaustion from masking. So we are learning more and more about autism, and we're learning more and more that a lot of people have gone undiagnosed autistic. It's a spectrum that is not just linear. It's a whole sphere of various domains and symptoms. That's a whole other, doctoral level course. You can get a whole degree in understanding autism. We're here just to touch on it today. But if you know that a kid is autistic, well, that's going to be easier to work with because you already know. But you might have some kids who are low need level on the spectrum of autism. They can function fairly well, but this is where they're not functioning, but they may not present as someone who's obviously autistic. So we need to lean into that and learn more about that so we can better understand what's happening with our students and our clients. So there a lot of times sensory sensitivity is very prevalent with autistic people. So noises, bright lights, and what do we have in schools? We got all that fluorescent lighting. That's very irritating to the nervous system for a lot of kids. Crowded hallways, it's noisy, the noisy lunchroom, you name it. You see, all of that is overwhelming their nervous system, and they become fatigued socially from trying to act normal, and that masking, it's exhausting. So a lot of times they're just going to skip out on school. And there are things that you can do about it. But here's some things that the school staff might notice if you're trying to identify if a kid might be on the spectrum. Again, you're not diagnosing, you're just looking for pointers to maybe refer them on to be evaluated by somebody that can help to figure out what is going on for them. And then here's some clinical strategies. Again, we're going to get into a lot of strategies in the next part of the presentation. I don't want you to feel like I'm cheating you. I just have so much information here. I don't have time to read it all to you right now, but you're going to get the good stuff. I promise. Don't worry. And it's all here on the slides too. All right, then you have your kids who have learning differences, unsupported or undiagnosed neurodivergence. So that could be a whole lot of different things. It could be dyslexia, it could be dysgraphia, it could be dyscalculia. I think that's how you say it. That I have that one, and I can't say the word. But it could be auditory or processing disorders. And a lot of times this is going on and it hasn't been identified. They can get all the way up into high school and it hasn't yet been identified. So sometimes we're on the front line and we're noticing signs of this. And so it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, right? So, for the same reasons an autistic child or an ADHDer are feeling all of those things that they're feeling, all these other things, there can be a sense of, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do this. Everybody else is able to do it. Why am I not able to do it? What's wrong with me? You see? And all of that is bringing on shame and self-doubt, and it's cognitive overload. Who wants to go to school for that? You could kind of understand, right? All right, I'm going to keep on going. I'm gonna blow through this because we want to get to the fun stuff here. What the school staff might see here. These are some of the signs. You got all of this. And then here's some of your clinical insights and strategies. And then we have our kids who are suffering with depression. We're going to see withdrawal. We're going to see exhaustion, fatigue, loss of interest. That's what depression looks like in young people, more than overt sadness. We're seeing withdrawal, fatigue, and loss of interest, isolation. A lot of times they've just lost willpower. They've lost all their motivation. They're just depleted. And the daily demands of school just are like too much for them. They may have neurochemical imbalances. They may need to be seen by a psychiatrist for medication potentially. There may be some cognitive distortion as a result of that frame of mind and that deficit in the neurochemicals. They may be having emotional numbing and social withdrawal. And as a result, they're feeling a lot of shame. Shame is a theme. It's a theme. A lot of times our school avoiders are feeling shame about what they are feeling, thinking, and experiencing because they don't even understand. So if we can begin to understand it, we can empower them to better understand themselves and to realize there are things we can do about it. All right. There might be family system changes or disruption. You want to look into that, right? When things are going on in the family, divorce, custody conflicts, loss and death, illness, financial strain. Maybe they've moved to a new house and maybe they're new in your school. All of this destabilizes the child's experience of safety and predictability. Now let's just stop here and talk about this. This is really important. No matter what diagnosis might be underlying a child's school avoidant behavior, no matter what the reason is, the one thing they all have in common, except for the ones who are just staying home to play video games because they can. I'm not talking about that group. I'm talking about all the ones that have some mental health underlying reason. What they all have in common is they all have a nervous system that is feeling overloaded. And the nervous system is going to seek relief to get to safety, even if the choice and the behavior is unhealthy. So they're all going to go towards the behavior that's going to give them the temporary relief to help their nervous system feel safe. They're all just trying to feel safe and secure, every single one of these kids. So let's remember that. And if we can get to what the underlying reason is, sometimes we can address that and that can help. But ultimately, we're going to have to help them to realize that they are safe. And we have to be the safe place for them. So here's some signs of what you see in school, what you see in the why it's happening, things you might see in their behavior, and some clinical insights and strategies. Just earmark these pages if you want to go back. If you know you've got a kid that fits into one of these categories, you've got it. You've got all this good information here. All right, anticipatory fears. These days especially, my goodness, I can't even imagine what those of you who are working in school settings, I mean, I bet you have some anticipatory anxiety, you know? School shootings for the kids, it's bullying. It's happening at school, it's happening online. Online, social media is making it worse. Anticipatory fears of being ostracized, of getting sick, which fits into some of those other categories. So, fear of potential threats. And when there's reality to it, I remember being in middle school and we had a tornado that actually hit our school while we were in it. Luckily, it just tore part of the roof off. But that was traumatizing for me, and it made going to school for me very, very anxiety provoking for a long time. Maybe you have something that actually happened in relation to school that made you feel nervous about going to school. So you can kind of relate to that, right? So this is just a little bit more about that brain science. We got the amygdala overreacting, the sympathetic nervous system arousal. That's that fight or flight. Cognitive rumination. What if this happens? What if da, 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 da? And they're picturing in their minds worst case scenario, and it creates emotional contagion. That's with peers. I mean, you've got peers, social contagion, I should say. If your peers are worrying about it and they're talking about it, that's going to cause you as their peer to feel it. So again, they're seeking a sense of experiential safety, felt safety by avoiding going to school. These are things you might see as a school staff member. These are some clinical insights. All right, we got through that section. Now we're almost to our 5-minute break. I want to talk to you real briefly about internalizers versus externalizers, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break. So children and teens, all individually experience distress in very different ways. Now we're going to break it into 2 categories. And this is not to overly generalize, it's just to help you kind of, have some framework here. Internalizers are the kids who are turning inward with their distress. On the outside, they might appear fine. They might just be internalizing it all, holding it in, going in with it. They may be very compliant. Externalizers are the ones who are showing the distress they're feeling outwardly. Oppositional, angry, defiant, disruptive. Both of these kinds of kids are having these reactions coming from the same internal experience: fear, shame, anxiety, or lack of control. It's just showing up differently. And a lot of times we actually should be more worried about our internalizers than our externalizers, because at least the externalizers are expressing it and getting it out. The internalizers, they're caving in. And those are the ones that are at high risk for suicide. So we want to make sure that we're really paying attention to those quiet kids in school. The loud ones, the ones that are getting in trouble, getting all the attention. Those are probably not the ones we need to be worrying about as much as the ones that are isolating and being quiet. So let's remember that. So the internalizers are quiet. They may be the invisible students that rarely cause any trouble, but they might be tearful in the mornings. They might be hiding in the bathroom. They might have a tendency to mask their distress. They avoid school because they're afraid of separation. They're afraid of embarrassment. They're afraid of making mistakes or disappointing other people. They're overwhelmed from the sensory input and the social demands. And maybe they have some perfectionistic tendencies too. And they're feeling like they got to get it just right. Externalizers, they can be argumentative. They can be aggressive before or during school. And they're frequently in conflicts with peers or teachers. The avoidance of school is disguised as defiance. It's not actually defiance. They're not being defiant. They are anxious. They are feeling a nervous system dysregulation experience. So their nervous system is hyper-aroused. The internalizers are having nervous system hypoarousal. So you're seeing the lower energy with the internalizer and the big energy with your externalizers. This is in here because this is a really important framework if you're not already familiar, to try to understand and use some terminology there with each other as colleagues, but also with parents, with caregivers. You could even do a presentation on this school counselors, those of you who go into the schools or in the school settings, give some information to parents about internalizers and externalizers, because the internalizers are the ones we really need to keep our eye on and make sure we're nurturing them and helping them to feel safe, because they go under the radar a lot. I've already said all this, I think. Yeah, so the main thing to know is that it looks different depending on the student's coping style, but the root is the same. A dysregulated nervous system is trying to find safety and control. All right, here we are. Perfect timing. It's 12:05 Eastern. I think we're all in the Eastern time. I don't know where y'all are. No, y'all are all over the place. It's 5 minutes after the top of the hour, wherever you are. We're going to take 5 minutes to take a quick break. Please be back in your seat in 5 minutes, because we need to go into now the full understanding of what we can do about it, and we need to save room for questions and answers. So let's be back in our seats. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to get started. Let's go. So now that we have a full understanding of what may be causing school avoidant behavior, what are we going to do about it? So the first thing I want you to remember is that all behavior has a reason. All behavior has a reason. There's a reason underneath everything people do and say. So let's, instead of jumping to correcting the behavior, let's first get curious about what is happening for this person. What is happening for this student? That is the foundational practice of everything that we're going to talk about what to do about it today. So here's some questions you are going to want to ask or consider. What's underneath the student's avoidant behavior? Is there history of trauma experiences? Let's be sure to break down what trauma means, of course. And that's, when you're talking to the caregivers or the parents, or you're getting any kind of a history, there's, big T trauma, the big obvious things, but there's little T trauma. Dropping a cafeteria tray, I've used that example several times, can be a trauma for a child, for a kid, when all their peers started laughing and clapping, for example. So trauma doesn't have to be the big, obvious, terrible things. It can be seemingly small things that are a big deal to the nervous system of the child. We need to ask the questions about, have there been changes in the family structure? Is anything going on at home that we need to know about? If we have the chance to ask that question. Have there been major changes in the child's life? What about experiences at school recently? What is the nature of the child's attachment or connection, relationship with primary caregivers? Has there been a mental health diagnosis? You need to be a curious detective to get to the bottom of what could it be. There's going to be a lot of variables, and you're going to be a detective and try to put all these pieces together. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle sometimes. So you want to stay curious, because curiosity is going to lead you to discovery and solutions. School avoidance is usually driven by a child's attempt to manage their overwhelming difficulties that they're having and feeling in their nervous system. And going to school, for whatever reason, is exacerbating that, or at least that's what they're perceiving. So they're not trying to be disobedient or defiant most of the time. 99% of the time, that's not what's going on. It's that they're trying to manage their dysregulated nervous system. Excuse me. So, as I have said before, we want to emphasize the importance of teamwork. This is not a solo mission. We need to work together. Clinicians, you need to work with the school staff. School staff, you need to work with the clinicians. You need to be communicating, getting all those forms of release that you need to get signed by the caregivers and all of that. And maybe, you have to get approval from your clients or your students. I don't know how that works in different places, but get whatever permissions you need. Make sure everybody is well informed. Make sure the student and the client is well informed that we work together as a team, because we all care about you and we are here to support you. And make sure that you are talking, because you can't do this alone. Can't do this in a vacuum. Not one adult in the child's life is going to make all of the difference. We have to work together. It's really important. Okay. The other thing that's very important is that we have to be the adults in the child's life that are helping them to experience feeling accepted and feeling celebrated and feeling, most importantly, feeling safe. So we've got to be able to help the students feel like they are noticed, they're seen, they're heard, we get you. Or if we don't understand, we're trying to understand. We want to allow the student to have a place where they can safely explore and express their thoughts, their feelings, and talk through that or through creative expressive activities. And we need to build a bridge that feels like safety, where the child feels like they have a relationship with you, whether you're the school counselor that they go and sit with during lunch because they're having social anxiety, whether you're the therapist that they see in the office. We have to build rapport. And in order to build that rapport, we have to be regulated in our nervous systems, and we have to be present in a way that is respectful and honoring of their presence. Absolutely key. If you don't have that, all the interventions I give to you are not going to be as effective. Another thing I want to bring up to you, this is from borrowing from something called ecosystemic play therapy. And I teach on this, but it applies to this topic as well. And that the idea is that your student, your client, the child, the teen, adolescent is embedded in multiple systems. They are in a family system, they're in a social system, they're in a peer system, they're in a school system, a classroom system, a cultural system. And when they're embedded in their systems, they are affected by the systems in which they are embedded. So you want to get curious about the child's systems. You want to understand more about what is going on for the child in all those various domains of their life. And you want to serve as an advocate to hopefully be able to interact with representatives of the various systems if you can. Again, teamwork. Let's all work together. Let's gather information. Let's understand what's happening for this child, if you can. So we want to understand that the development of their emotions and their behavior and all of that is affected by their systems, and their systems are affected by whatever they're going through. And so children are going through a lot of change in the middle school years and the high school years, and we need to understand how that is interacting with the various systems in which they are embedded, because it's going to give us information and it's going to help us to help them. All right, let's get into the interventions. All right, we are going to tailor our treatment plans or our plan of action, whatever it's called in your domain where you are working, the setting you're working in. We're going to tailor it to the individual. And so some options in a clinical setting would be gradual exposure, which we're going to talk about, social skills training, some cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to talk some specifics about that, or maybe some trauma-focused therapy if it's a child that has that trauma history. We want to make sure we're picking the clinical intervention that's going to be the best fit for this particular student. And I call that being prescriptive. And you can only be a prescriptive therapist or a prescriptive clinician if you are trained in a variety of different ways to understand and treat a client, depending on what they're presenting with. If you're a brand new therapist, and I think there are some students here, if you're brand new to being in the field of counseling and social work, you're not going to be able to be as prescriptive because you haven't learned all of the things yet, and that's okay. That's what you've got mentors for, supervisors for. But those of you who are supervising, you need to help the students, you need to help the younger professionals to understand that we need to be able to walk around the situation, try to see it from all angles, and pick and choose what's going to be the best fit for each student. So incentive restructuring is something that you can do in the school setting and at home, where the student is receiving some kind of feedback or experience that reinforces their desire to go to school rather than avoid. So, for example, if they're going to stay home from school, you got to get the parents on board with like, okay, if you are going to choose not to go to school, there's not going to be access to the internet. There's not going to be attention from me. You're going to have to just sit and read and do your homework. So you make it as boring as possible for them, not as punishment, just as this is just the thing. Like, these are the hours that you're supposed to be in school. So if you can't be in school, you're going to have to sit here at the dining room table and just do schoolwork. And then the parents have to be careful not to give too much nurturing attention and all of that, because we want it to be just as bland as possible. And then I can't remember if this is on the next slide, so I may be getting ahead of myself. But in school, you want to make going to school as welcoming and as interesting and as reinforcing as possible. So you want to entice them to want to go to school. So I believe I do have some strategies on another slide here. But yeah, one thing is the parent coaching. You want to help the parents, if you have an opportunity to do this, basically redesign the routines at home to support the child in going to school and make clear boundaries around the what they you expect from the child, and make sure that the home environment is very predictable and consistent, and that there is calm communication. We don't want the child to feel punished for any of this. We do want the child to understand that, we want to make this as nice for you as possible so that you want to go there. It's just basic behaviorism in this case. Okay, for you school counselors, social workers at school, people that are in the school setting, or those of you who are in the clinician's office as well, you want to make your environment where the child is coming to see you and talk with you as warm and welcoming as possible, with no pressure to perform. It's a place where you're delighting in them, you're welcoming them, you're accepting of them, you're delighting in who they are, right? Because the more experience they have with that, the more they're going to be able to relax in their nervous system and receive whatever interventions and skill building and whatever you're going to be doing with them. Here's some practical things for school-based support for students when they're coming back from having been avoiding school. So make sure you're keeping up with the IEPs, the 504s, those individualized learning plans, making sure the accommodations are being followed and are communicated clearly. Again, we've got that whole teamwork thing going. If they don't have an IEP, maybe you go through the process of having that happen. You want to leverage existing trusted relationships. So identify one or two familiar adults in the school setting. Maybe it's the coach. Maybe it's their teacher that they had last year for language arts or something, somebody that the student really likes and feels safe with. And see if you can bring them into the fold to help the student to have a connected, safe experience when they're coming back into the school environment. Because if we can get them to come back, we want to keep them. We want to keep them coming, right? Gentle transition supports. A peer, you can identify a peer who is a very helpful and stable person that can maybe meet the student at the door and walk with them to class and chat with them. That might be a way of helping them transition in. Make sure that you're addressing any safety concerns. Make sure you're exploring and resolving any incidents of patterns of bullying. We want to get that eliminated, nipped in the bud, make whatever changes need to happen for that student to feel safe at school. Very, 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 very important. You're going to adapt the environment for comfort. So in the classroom, if they have sensory sensitivity, for example, maybe be willing to put lamp light in the classroom instead of having, fluorescent lights overhead. Maybe have the students sit close to the teacher if that feels safe for the student, or maybe the student would feel safer sitting in the back of the room, depending on what they have going on. Again, we're tailoring this to fit the individual. Integrate interest into connection. Encourage teachers aides to really work on helping this child to feel seen, feel heard, to feel safe. I'm here for you. Knowing what the child's interests are, maybe incorporate that into the learning plan, the lesson plan. If they need to have a fidget object in their desk, let them have that. Whatever's going to help them to be able to manage all the uncomfortable feelings that they're having as much as possible. You can offer a discreet way for the student to signal that they need a break. Maybe they're starting to feel overwhelmed. And so you can have them hold up a card, or maybe it's a hand signal, maybe it's a just tug on the ear, something that the teacher knows in advance that the student is asking for a break, nonverbal, and maybe the teacher nods or points to them, and that gives the student the pre-established permission to go to the restroom or go sit in the the back of the reading corner in the classroom, or to get up and stretch their body. Maybe that's what they need in order to regulate themselves. So ensure that we have consistent staffing and training. Familiar faces and predictable responses are key to stability. We're trying to give the students an experience of you're safe here, you're safe here. We're here for you. You're safe with us. That's what we want their nervous system to receive and feel. And we might invite these students to participate, and invite is the key word, not assign, but invite the student. Would you like to help me with passing out these booklets? Or would you like to wipe the whiteboard? You know, things like this to help the student feel like they're a part of the classroom. And listen, you give them the prerogative to say no. It's just an invitation. Sometimes it works. Remember that progress is not linear. So try not to push. Just because one step goes really well, don't push too fast. Let the trust of the experience grow gradually for the student. Keep your transitions low key. Avoid big public praise or announcement when a student returns. Let them slide on in. We don't want a big just to do, because a lot of times that just triggers their shame that they've been gone. Okay. We want to make sure we're honoring sensory needs. You know, be flexible about what they wear, what materials they may need that are causing that create comfort for them rather than discomfort. And make sure you're acknowledging effort over perfection. When a student arrives late, focus on the success that they came. Hey, you're here. I'm so glad you're here. You know, instead of focusing on the fact that they're late arriving. All right, specific interventions. I want to tell you about a website. If I have time, I'm going to switch over and show you this website. But I want you to write this down because it has fantastic interventions. It's called, and I don't have any affiliation with this website, so I'm not promoting anything. I'm just telling you, I'm giving you a resource here. It's specifically for school counselors, but clinicians, you can use a lot of this in the therapy room as well. It's socialemotionalworkshop.com. I don't even know this person that put this website together, but I am so stinking impressed with this. There's so much good stuff in there. And like I said, I have all these tabs open. I was going to show you stuff, but I don't think I'm going to have time today. So I'll let you peruse that yourself. This is just an example of one thing that I pulled. They actually have something you can sign up for and get free. I do hope I have time. I think I'm going to have time to show you that because I want you to have this. I'm going to show it to you. But you need to go to this website, and she has a little thing where I think it's called something Kick. I'll show you in a second, but you can sign up and she'll send it to your inbox and it's free. She also has some things you can purchase on there, but there's a lot of free stuff. So anyway, this is just an example of a way to help a student in a kind of a cute way to understand like what is control, you know, and bossing the thoughts and throwing away the thoughts that you don't want to have. And these are just ways to cognitively restructure certain cognitive trains. So a lot of the training, the skill building we would be doing, the therapy we'd be doing with these students is to help them begin understanding how they can recognize their thoughts and they can actually choose to do something different with their thoughts. And so you'll find a lot of good things over there. One thing, you'll find a whole blog article over on her website. I think it's 6 ways of scaling. So I'm going to show you a couple things here. But you can create a feelings thermometer. This is a great way to help students have self-awareness of how intense their feelings are. So we don't have thermometers around like this anymore. I don't even know if anybody would relate to this. This is sort of an old school thing. But the idea is to show that there's some, these degrees of intensity of where we're feeling. So on this one, for example, it goes from I'm feeling great down at the bottom, I'm at a 1 to 10. I feel like I'm about to explode or I am exploding out of control. So this is going to empower students to be able to have that awareness of where they're feeling in their emotions, how they're feeling in their bodies. Feelings pie is another example. This is just a picture that I borrowed from somewhere. Let's see. I think this came from helpfulhealer.wordpress.com. This feelings pie is a visual, sort of a creative coloring activity where you could decide together, 6 different emotions that they have on a regular basis. Now, all human beings experience the same range of emotions at some point in our lives. Some of us feel certain emotions more often than others, but these are universal. And there's a lot of emotions, but you can choose or have them choose the 6 that they feel the most often. And if they're having trouble coming up with the words, you can get one of those emotion wheels, or, with all the different emotions on there that you can choose from as well. So then they just correlate a color with the emotion they're having, and then they can color in the feelings pie for how much of the pie is that particular emotion today. Because it might be different today than yesterday. So make yourself some feeling pie handouts that are blank. Make a bunch of copies, have them in your office, and you could have them do one every time they come in to see you, just as a way of measuring. And this is going to train them to be more reflective of their feelings along the way. All right, I got to keep going because I got stuff to cover and we've only got so much time. This is the emotional weather forecast. This is just another way to sort of conceptualize emotions. So you might have them understand that, sometimes we're in times where we have really heavy storms. And these are some of the feelings that we might have that correlate with that stormy, feeling. And then we might have a time when the storm is starting to clear. It's not quite clear yet. We still have some clouds in the sky and we might be feeling these feelings. And then maybe eventually we'll get to a day where we have a full sunny day. And these are some of the feelings we might be having. So then you can talk in terms of weather report. I wonder how your weather report is today. These are things you could do on a regular basis. It's a ritual, it's a routine, and it reinforces having them reflect on the inner landscape of their mind and their inner world emotionally. And then, of course, we have some education we can do with them about thoughts, like I mentioned, and we can introduce to them what automatic negative thoughts are and how they happen all the time. Research estimates that 80% of our thoughts are actually negative, and 95% of those thoughts were the same repetitive thoughts they thought before and before that. So we have repetitive, automatic, negative thoughts. Now, the more aware we become of it, the more likely we are to do something about it. So basically, the conclusion of all the statistics here is that 97% of our worries are baseless. They're the results of unfounded, pessimistic perceptions that they're not true. So if we can help students to realize that and realize they can master their thoughts, it's quite empowering and it's quite effective. This is a poster you can get for free on Teachers Pay Teachers, whatever that website is, Teachers Pay Teachers. If you just go in there and look for the automatic negative thoughts poster, the free automatic negative thoughts poster, you can download this. It doesn't show the whole poster here because it got cut off when I was doing a picture of it. But this is something you can hang in your office. You can use as a handout. You can use it, with your students that you're working with your clients. Identifying common automatic negative thoughts and then having ways to challenge those automatic negative thoughts. There's a lot of good free stuff on Teachers Pay Teachers, by the way, and a lot of low fee stuff too. So go check that out. Okay, here's that thing I was telling you about, the kick plan. I do want to share this with you. So I'm going to unshare this screen so I can share the other screen. Hold on just a minute because I don't think it'll transfer once let me open another window. Nope, that's not it. It's over here. Hang on, I'm coming. Wait a minute. Here it is. Yes, this is the thing I was telling you about. Okay, this is on that website that I told you about, social emotional workshop.com. Hang with me. I'm getting there. I think this is it. No. So sorry. It's on Google Chrome, Lynn. Finding there it is. All right, this is called the Kick Plan for Anxiety. It's a free toolbox. It's full of amazing resources you can use. I just want to show you real quick. So she goes through and she explains what it is, how to use it, what's included, and you have all of these interventions you can use. It has what the KICK stands for: knowing I'm nervous, icky thoughts, calm thoughts, keep practicing. You can use this, even though this is probably designed for more elementary age kids. I promise you, I use younger level stuff with teens all of the time successfully. I use it with adults. So don't even worry about that. And if they resist a little bit and say, oh, this is babyish, you can just say, I know, but let's just do it anyway. I think it'll be fun. Let's give it a try. And usually they'll have fun doing it. So in here, you can see the blog posts that are correlated with a lot of the interventions, and she's got some other resources here, but I just wanted you to see how cool this is. So there's a feelings in my body activity. There's a feelings card where you can cut these out and make it into a card game. You've got your feeling thermometer here that you can just print out and color. You've got your negative thinking, check the facts. That's the challenging of the cognitions and so forth. You see what I'm saying here. So go grab this because it is so amazing. She's got so many good stuff there. So many good stuff. So much good stuff. Okay. All right, let me get back to my slideshow. Hold on. Whoops, my calendar popped up there. All right. Gradual exposure. We have to talk about this. I'm going to blow through this because I got to cover a lot because I want to make time for questions and answers. Gradual exposure for school avoidance, key concepts and evidence. This is proven, okay? It's a behavioral technique. It's going to help your students and your clients to be able to approach what they fear, in this case, going to school, what they're feeling anxious about, what they're avoiding. They're going to be able to approach it with ways to manage their anxiety. And we're going to do it on an incremental basis. And this is for the ones that are really like refusing or not able to come to school. So what this is going to do is it's going to shift their avoidant behavior to more tolerant behavior through repetition. While they're controlled in a controlled way, they're being exposed to going back to school. So basically they're going to slowly come back. Maybe the first day they just go in the front door and stay for 5 minutes. And then maybe they come, meet a friend and they walk to class together and they stay for the first class. And then we get them and so we slowly are going to build them back into being able to come. It's been proven by research to be very common for OCD, specific phobias, anxiety disorders. So it's very adaptable to school avoidant behavior. So we're going to start small. We're going to gradually increase the demands. And then we're going to use a hierarchy of exposures ranked from least to most anxiety provoking. So let's say the most anxiety provoking part of going to school is having to go to PE class. That's going to be the last thing that we expose them to. So we're going to get them, and we're going to do that very gradually. So the idea is for them to see, okay, I felt really anxious. I was an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. I did feel like I was short of breath. My heart was racing, but also I realized I'm okay. I did it. I made it. Every time we can have that experience, we can realize, oh, I can feel anxiety and stick with it. And eventually the anxiety starts to dissipate. The more likely they are going to be able to continue to come back. Got it? Okay. We've got some evidence-based research here backing this up. I'm not going to read all of this. There's some clinical considerations. This has to be collaborative. It has to be gradual. And it has to be paced. You have to have the buy-in of the student to do this. You cannot force this. This has to be, in order to, so you're not going to start off with gradual exposure right when you're meeting the student. You're going to build rapport. You're going to make sure that they feel safe with you. If that's through telehealth or on the phone, whatever needs to happen to begin to build the relationship and the trust. You're going to be showing empathy and understanding. And then you're going to kind of start to be collaborative in which you're going to invite the child to be a part of a process that could actually make going to school, a pleasant experience. Now, that might be a far reach for them, but you can invite them. Would they be willing to just do an experiment with you? Just a little bitty experiment. And then you can begin to introduce the more, the further steps of gradual exposure. I have to give a shout out to mindfulness-based interventions because I am working on my dissertation research right now on mindfulness and mindfulness-based practices with young adults and anxiety disorders and symptoms of anxiety. So this is my passion. And again, I teach mindfulness-based therapy. It is so effective. So I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I just want to say, if you haven't learned about what mindfulness is or how to practice it, I highly encourage you. Find a free training or come to another training that I do about that. And you really realize that you as a practitioner, as a clinician, as a school staff, you have to learn about it for yourself before you can introduce it to your students. That's really important. You can't just go in with a worksheet teaching about mindfulness if you're not embodying the practice. That's all I'm going to say about that. Art journaling for anxiety. So this is going to provide your students with a nonverbal outlet for exploring and expressing the emotions they may be having that are hard to otherwise articulate. Sometimes these kids don't have a lot of words. You might see a lot of, I don't know, shrugging, right? It just means that they haven't identified how to really express what it is that they're feeling, but they're feeling it. And so art journaling can help with that. And so it's a right brain creative activity. It can help with sensory regulation. It can help calm the nervous system. It facilitates an experience of mindfulness, self-reflection, and a sense of self-efficacy to be able to learn how to find a creative way to identify and name and manage what they're feeling through various art forms. Creative and expressive activities for teens, there are tons of them. I think that was a slide in and of itself. Anything where you're just inviting the kids to explore through art medium, creative medium, collages, coloring, painting, clay work, anything like that can be a wonderful way for them to be able to explore what they're feeling on a sensory basis, to express what they're feeling in nonverbal ways. Color My Feelings is another version of that thing we saw in that kick anxiety thing, where you could just have a cutout of a human body. This one kind of cracks me up with the fingers. I think it's kind of funny. But, what color is your feeling? Do you feel red today? Do you feel yellow today? Where are you feeling it in your body? Why don't you color in the part of the body that fits for where you're feeling it? So this just sort of begins the process of somatic awareness, body awareness, because our bodies do feel and reflect what our nervous system is feeling. So it's good to get kids into their physical bodies, being able to identify that. It can be very empowering. Inside Outside Me is an activity where you draw a cutout of, or you can get the pre-cutouts. I had some somewhere here in my office and I just reorganized. Now I don't have it on hand, but little gingerbread people. I got a bunch of them at the dollar store. Now it's the $1.25 store, or Dollar Tree, I should say, where you invite them to use any markers, stickers, whatever you have, to show you on one side what it feels like to be who they are on the inside, and on the other side, what they think other people see about them. And most of the time, the two sides look very different. And it's just sort of illustrative, or is that the word? It illustrates that we can be feeling a whole lot of stuff on the inside, but showing something very different on the outside. So this works for our externalizers and our internalizers. Neurographic drawing and coloring. I've been getting a lot of advertisements on my Facebook feed about this lately because I'm pretty sure that it's paying attention to what I'm researching and what I'm talking about. Funny how that works. There are some free videos over on the YouTube platform. You can go look up neurographic coloring and learn about it and practice it yourself first. It is fantastic. You don't need to go pay for a course about this. Just go find the free stuff. But this is a very right-brained activity. So we're just sort of, you'll see, but you're drawing lines like with a Sharpie pen first. And then you're just taking your paint or your markers and you're coloring it in however your bright brain guides you to do. And it is incredibly mirroring what's going on in the nervous system for the individual. It's powerful intervention. It's an art therapy intervention. I'm not an art therapist. I'm not teaching you how to do this. I'm not teaching you the art therapy part, but as an experiencer of it myself, I can vouch for this. And I have suggested this to my clients. My clients have had some amazing experiences. So I can't emphasize it enough. Oh my goodness. I kind of went through that really fast, but that's okay. If we still have time, if we don't have a lot of questions, then I will show you those interventions that I was talking about on the website. So we always have that as a backup. So here, I just need to know, moderator, where I can find the questions and answers. Are they in the chat box, or is there another place where they are? Is it
Yeah,
down?
so they are in the Q&A box. I can read the questions to you. They're down at the bottom. If you want to read the questions yourself, you're welcome to do that as well.
No, you go ahead and read them. That's right. But I'll pull it up so I can see it as we go.
Yeah, okay. We actually do have quite a bit of questions, and we have about 10, sorry, not 10, about 20 minutes left. So I think we could use these last minutes, 20 minutes to answer questions if that works for you.
Yeah, because there's some really great questions in here.
Alrighty, let me go back to the top and we will get started. First question, we have two of the same. So, what's the difference between truancy and school avoidance?
So truancy is an older term and an older conceptualization, and that is basically defining when we have students who have been identified as being, and I don't like this label, I'm just going to tell you, but I'm going to say it, okay, oppositional and defiant. So these are individuals who meet the criteria for whatever reason. This is the reason I don't like this, because I think there's still a reason for the behavior, but they would argue that no, these are the kids who are just not going to school because they just don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to school because they don't like school. They don't want to go to school because they're defying what their the parents tell them to do. I have a little bit of a challenge with that personally, because I don't think that there's probably that much differentiation. But based on what the literature says, I have to present to you that there's a difference between truancy and school avoidance. But I would venture to say that there is almost always some reason under the behavior. So hopefully that answers your question. Maybe those of you who work in the school system might have a different perspective, because sometimes we have students who, it may root back to trauma early in childhood that never got addressed, and now it's become such a behavioral problem that it's a whole part of their identity. Can we reach them? Can we help them? I would hope so. But that's my answer to that question.
And then another user asked if they were able to possibly share the slides with their staff who are not in attendance today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no problem with that, but I will defer to you guys because you're the ones that are going to be, I know that they're going to be selling this training, I think, or making this available. So you would probably want to check with TPN about that. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy to have you use them, as long as you're not using it to go create, and using it in your own training. But just for sharing with your staff members, I have no problem with that.
Right. And Elizabeth, it is a free training if any of your staff, wanted to sign up and maybe watch the recording as well, and they can get access to the slides. But if the presenter is okay with you sharing it with them, then we are perfectly fine with that as well. It is free, so it's not like, that'll be fine.
Oh, that's good to know.
Okay, next question. So the amygdala overcompensates for the prefrontal cortex not being developed.
It's not so much that it overcompensates, it's that what's happening is as the brain develops, when an infant is born, the brain stem is the first, part of the brain that has developed. And then from there, going up from the back, the emotional brain, which is like, if this is your brain, and this is the brain stem, this is all cortex. This is prefrontal cortex. This is the last part of the brain to develop. It's not fully developed until around age 25. The amygdala is like the thumbnail right here in the limbic brain, which is kind of in the lower center part of the brain. And what happens using this hand model is this part of the brain is not fully developed. So it's there, but it's still growing and developing. So it's not super strong yet. It's like a muscle that hasn't been really grown fully. This part of the brain, because it developed first, tends to lead. And so when the limbic brain gets fired up because it perceives some threat from outside, it kind of heats up and it causes this part of the brain to go offline. So any connectivity that you have with your ability to reason and use logic kind of goes out the window when the limbic brain gets activated. I hope that makes sense. So what we want to do with the interventions we're doing is we're helping them at an age and developmentally appropriate level to start really strengthening this part of the brain. And eventually we're able to have some strengthening here so much that we're able to regulate this before it gets to that explosive level by remembering, oh, I have something, Miss Smith taught me to do that I can do here to help me get my emotions a little bit smaller. I hope that helps. If you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, someone said that made perfect sense.
Good. Could the social anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder appear similarly to relationship OCD? Oftentimes, you will see, yes, you'll see some obsessive thinking in kids who have relationship-based, like social anxiety, or the relationship aspect of their generalized anxiety disorder. You can see that. However, there is a difference between pure anxiety and OCD. In that in OCD, you're going to have compulsive behaviors. It's a whole thing in and of itself where they're going to have certain things that they have to do, they're compelled to do in order to help their their obsessions to get smaller temporarily. And you don't typically see that with anxiety. You might see behaviors where they're seeking reassurance, but it may not be a compulsive reassurance seeking. So it's a little bit different. So for example, with a kid who has anxiety, if they're looking for reassurance, you're going to give them reassurance. But if you have a kid who has OCD, you don't want to give them reassurance every time because that's just one of their rituals. That's the big difference. And that's why it's important to know the difference. I'm going to read this one here. I have a student who has missed significant amounts of school for going on 3 years, all 3 middle school years. The parents and student report it as anxiety. What we have observed is that the student is okay to do some classes and not others, or when asked to do any work, they shut down and state they are having a panic attack. When the bell rings for a preferred class, they seem perfectly fine, like a light switch. They are fine in large crowds and want to do all the fun things, but not attend class. Well, I want to caution you because I don't know if this is what you're hinting at, but we have to be careful with this to assume that that means that they're just making it up. Because what's probably happening here is they literally are triggered by the particular classes or the particular things that are going on. And we need to be detectives and figure out more about that. And it makes perfect sense to me that they feel better when they're out of class. They're no longer having the stimuli in the class that is triggering them. And when they get to do the fun things, well, yeah, because that's where they feel safe. Remember, they're seeking safety. So I would want to get to the bottom of, in more detail, what are their triggers? How intense is the anxiety when they're feeling it? And I would want to be teaching them how to experience the anxiety and use coping skills instead of letting them be removed from the class. I think that we want to work towards, I would even use gradual exposure if you have to get them used to being present with it, managing the anxiety, identifying how intense it is. There's all these skills that, I talked about scaling, and I talked about automatic negative thoughts, and I talked about all the emotional regulation things are the things we would want to teach this student. So I would suggest that the student probably needs, if not in psychotherapy with somebody that can actually do this level of work with them, it would be very good for the student to be in their own therapy. And if they are in therapy, I would be communicating with the therapist about what you guys can do together as a team. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the best I can do right now. Can you speak to anxiety, collective trauma from constant media exposure to school gun violence, lockdown drills, etc.? Yeah, I did kind of talk about this in the presentation in terms of anticipatory anxiety and what did I call it? Kind of social contagion, where if a lot of people are feeling anxious about it, other people are going to feel anxious about it, and we can collectively have some anxiety there. And it's based in reality. This is not anxiety about something we're imagining. It's actually things that have happened in the world. And I think that what we have to do is work together collectively to look at how we are safe and look at likelihood, look at statistics of how likely is it to happen. how unlikely it is to happen, and what safety measures do we have in place, and just to remind ourselves, in this moment, I am safe. We have to train our nervous systems to know. See, here's the thing, guys. We're all walking around in the world, and any one of us could get hit by a bus when we cross the street, or could be struck by lightning when we're standing out in the middle of the yard. But it's probably not going to happen. It's not probably not going to happen, and we don't go around worrying about that all the time. It's kind of the same idea about this. You can't help but worry if you worry. But what we can do is reprogram our minds to realize we are safe. It's very unlikely and we are safe. So that's what I would focus on. I would focus on, we have safety measures implemented. And let's look right now where we are. Let's name 5 things we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can touch, 2 things that we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. Let's use these kinds of practices to come into present moment and anchor in the safety of this moment and feel safe in our nervous systems in this moment. So a lot of present moment mindfulness practice will help with that. Also, just looking at the facts, we have good safety measures in place. We can't control for things we can't control for, but what we can do is focus on the safety we do have. How do you rebuild a child's nervous system? Oh, goodness. Well, that's a loaded question, Sierra. Because there's a lot to it. And that's, I can't really answer it very simply, except to say that a child has to be working with trusted, trained, safe adults who can co-regulate with them to give them a new experience of feeling safe. That's basically in a nutshell. And so they have to have repeated experiences with trusted, safe adults who know how to co-regulate, who know how to be the safety, who know how to let them borrow their safe nervous system so their nervous system can reset. And the more the nervous system is able to have experience of doing the thing and realizing that it's safe, the more the nervous system will begin to feel safe automatically in that circumstance. So it's through repetition, it's through reprogramming, it's through recalibrating, through experience, co-regulation with adults who know what they're doing to help them with that. How do we encourage them to believe they're safe when they practice active shooter drills? I would encourage them to repeat the mantra, I am safe, I am connected, I am loved. I am safe in this moment. I am connected to people that are taking care of me, and I know that I'm loved and cared for. This kind of helps the nervous system in the moment. It borrows from a practice called havening or havening, in which there's a physical part of it too, where they take the fingers around the hairline and down to the vagus nerve, and just say, I am safe, I am connected, I am loved. I'm safe, I'm connected, I'm loved. They could put one hand on their heart, one hand on their belly to anchor in the belief and the thought, the repeated thought, I am safe in this moment. I am safe in this moment. This is just a drill. This is just practice. I am safe in this moment. Tips on combating parental affects on children's avoidance. Parental effects on children's avoidance. Parent coaching, helping getting parents on board as part of the team, coaching them on what they need to be doing differently at home, not punishing, but not making it appealing for the children to stay at home. Understanding that it's a matter of fact. These are school hours, and children are required to go to school. And if you're not going to go to school, you're going to need to sit at the desk and do the school work during this time. It won't be a time for eating snacks, or we're going to observe the same schedule at home that you observe when you're at school. That's what I would recommend. Recently, New York State mandated a no phone ban in all schools across the state. I've seen this add to the anxiety my kid clients feel about not having access to call or contact their parents in case they feel sick or there's an emergency like a school shooting threat. How can we support students like this going forward? Whew, that's a big one. On one hand, I'm really glad that they're not letting them have their phones all day during school for so many other reasons. I can see your point. I would say that we didn't have phones when I was in school. What did we do? I would say we understand that you can feel anxious about not having your your phone. But see, I think that's a problem in and of itself, that they're constantly able to be in contact. It's like, well, if we could practice being here and know that we're safe here with the people that are taking care of us at school, also, if they're worried about there being an emergency, maybe there could be a policy where if there's a real emergency, you will get your phone back. How about that? Like maybe the phones go into a cubby or in a basket where the teacher has access to them in each classroom or something like that. And the children know if there's an emergency, you're going to get your phone back. That might be a compromise. I'm just talking off the top of my head here, y'all. So if you disagree with me, it's okay. Can you talk about over pathologizing as it relates to why the school avoidance occurs? So the truth of the matter is there may be legitimate mental health diagnoses, as we went through a whole lot of them, right? Over pathologizing is where we're encouraging, whether we realize it or not, for the child to over-identify with their mental health diagnosis. We need to look at the mental health diagnosis, in my opinion. As the editor of the play therapy treatment planning book that's out there, and having written about treatment planning and taught about, I can tell you this. Let's let the diagnosis simply be a piece of the puzzle that points to how we can go about supporting the student. Let's not let it be a big label that we slap on their sleeve and say, it's because you're an ADHDer. But let's use the fact that they are an ADHDer as a point to better understand what it's like to be an ADHDer and how these things are easier for you, but these things are harder for you. And let's figure out what we can do about it. So use it as a pointer instead of a landing point. It's the beginning. It's not the end of understanding what's happening for them. Our presenter has mentioned that she has been diagnosed with some of these same afflictions, but most clients have not been diagnosed. How did she get diagnosed with these, and how could we help our clients get diagnosed? Are you talking about me? I recognize many of these are not DSM diagnoses. Okay, so if you're on the ground as a school staff and you're not really supposed to be diagnosing anybody, but I've just given you information that says, it could be this, it could be that. I would recommend that the child go be referred for evaluation. So I don't know what that means for you where you are, and we can't get into that today in the interest of time, but I would think that there's some mechanism through your school system to have the child assessed. If you as the school staff member have been through a training and you're seeing signs that it could possibly be this, it can be a support mechanism to have the child properly assessed by a school psychologist, someone who is trained and is able to make that assessment, a mental health professional. Maybe there's a mental health program in your school. I would be reaching out to the mental health experts that you have access to help with that process, because if you can get them properly diagnosed, then you're going to really have a lot more information about how to move forward and how to best support that student. Is there an evidence-based inventory or questionnaire that helps guide a diagnosis for school avoidance? Not that I know of. There may be, but I haven't come across one so far. The information I've given you in this training can be pretty well sort of digested and used to support that process. It's not like there's an assessment that that would diagnose that you could give. I really think you would have to rely on some of the pieces of the puzzle that you're putting together, and then working as a team with some mental health professionals as well to figure out what's going on. Supervision, consultation with experts on the subject, I would say. Neil Sigmund and Amy Little are both members from Wraparound, Maryland. Am I saying that right? Currently using my laptop as her. Oh, I don't know. I don't think that's a question. If it was, I'm not seeing the question there. When it comes to collaborating with parents, what can we do if parents do not want to get involved or the teen does not want their parents involved? That's going to be on a case-by-case basis. I will tell you my general opinion is that we want to respect the autonomy of adolescents as much as possible, but try to get their buy-in to realize that in a lot of cases, involving parents can actually support them, but there may be reasons. There may be some abuse going on at home. Maybe their parents are overly strict and really punitive, or maybe their parents are really dysregulated and they know that that's not going to turn out well. In that case, I would just want to ask a little bit more about that. And I would veer on the side of respecting the adolescent and try to help them as much as you can if they're really stating that preference strongly. When providing support to help transition the student, how long would you allow that to go on? We have a student who takes 45 minutes or more to transition. They will not identify strategies that help despite having a list that they created, or they shrug their shoulders. Per the IEP, we are not allowed to ask probing questions. Right. So I would go back to the drawing board. I would watch out for your frustration, because if you start to get into the mindset, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but if you get into the mindset of blaming the student, you're in the wrong mindset. Because what's happening is that student is not receiving enough of what they need to feel safe in the present circumstances, or they are not feeling safe enough to use the strategies that they've been given. I think they need to, if they're in therapy, I'm sorry, y'all, I can't see through my glasses. If they are in therapy, I would want to talk with the therapist about what the therapist recommends there. There's always a reason for behavior. Always get curious. Watch out for when you drift over into thinking that the student is just making this difficult. They're not defying. They're for what something is not working. So let's get curious about that. That's why you're not allowed to ask probing questions, probably because maybe that activates the anxiety. But whoever has told you that you're not allowed to ask probing questions probably needs to be the same person you go to ask a follow-up question about, okay, then what can we do? That's what I would suggest. I'm curious about working with parents who, in an effort to protect their child from these uncomfortable feelings, are reinforcing the avoidance. Yeah, I want to piggyback on this with the schools also moving kids to virtual due to many absences, and how, as a clinician, we can advocate for them to not move them virtual. Whew, yeah. I think this comes with some psychoeducation. What's happening here is that the school staff, understandably, as well as the parents, they're feeling their own anxiety. School staff is worrying about, like, oh my gosh, these kids have got to go to school. Like, our numbers are hurting. They're not getting their days in. They're not going to pass the grade, and that's going to affect the teacher's performance. And I don't know how it all cascades down. And the parents are feeling anxiety because it's like, oh my gosh, the school's like threatening to take me to court if my kid doesn't go to school. So they're just trying to get done whatever needs to get done so that their anxiety can be settled, right? But remember, these kids need the adults in their lives to be regulated, to be centered. So we need to help the staff members and the parents, realize that, oh, but you see, if we need to give him the experience, or her, the experience of going to school, and we can use gradual exposure therapy. And this has been shown by science to help the child. But if we make it too easy for them to not do it, then we're never going to make the progress. So we, the adults, have to be the ones that are being the strong nervous systems for these kids. What should school staff do if the parents want to stay, and I know we're running over a bit, with the child while they transition? We have tried setting limits. The parent needs to leave so they can support student, and they refuse. So the parents probably need to better understand, have some psychoeducation on how anxiety works, and how rescuing the child and over reassuring the child is not going to help them to transition. They need to they need to be able to hand off all of that to the school staff, so the child can have an experience of feeling safe with school staff and not having to be with the parent to feel safe. Because ultimately, we want the child to have an experience of feeling safe in the environment of school without the crutches of parents. So there's some separation anxiety disorder probably going on there. And oftentimes, kids with separation anxiety disorder have an anxious parent who's also having anxiety about separating from their child. There's oftentimes some enmeshment going on there. So there might need to be some therapeutic intervention for the parent in that case with regard to their anxiety. All right, I'm going to take 2 more questions, then I'm going to have to wrap up for today. Are these websites included in the slides, or are these extra slides you included? I put extra slides in there, but I gave you the websites that I was referring to. If you're talking about that, that one thing, it is in the slideshow, the socialemotionalworkshop.com, and then Teachers Pay Teachers. That's a website that you can look up. I don't know what other websites you may be referring to. I'm sorry. But listen, I'm available. You guys can reach me through my website, which is wonderscounseling.com. You can feel free to email me if you have a quick question about anything that I've gone over today. I welcome you. I have a newsletter that goes out with free resources every week. You can sign up for that if you want. I'm an open book. And one more question: how or do these interventions work with students who are attending but not participating or completing work? Really kind of the same way. I mean, you want to get to do the same process of figuring out, okay, there's a reason for all behavior. So first, let me get curious. Let me look at this as a puzzle. Let me figure out what's happening for this student. I wonder why the student's not participating. I wonder why they're not completing their work. I wonder what's underlying that. So I might want, if I'm the counselor, I want to do some exploration with the student about that. And I would want to do it in a nonverbal, exploratory, expressive, creative activity kind of thing, where they're sort of they're even trying to figure out what they're feeling in that moment. And what's the payoff? What are they getting out of not completing their work? Is it giving them relief from anxiety that they're going to fail if they do the work? Is it fear of failure? Is that what's motivating the refusal to do the work? Is it fear of feeling that performance anxiety that is causing them to not participate? We want to get curious about what is going on. If there's one thing you take away from this whole training today, I hope it's that let's really help ourselves to get away from any line of thinking that this kid is just being defiant and realize, no, there is a reason for all behavior. Now, in the very rare cases, there might be a kid that has been so programmed to believe that they're a bad kid, that they're going to do the wrong things just to whatever. But I still believe that there's a reason for all behavior. And if we can get curious enough and get creative enough, we can get to the bottom of it. And it helps to work as a team. And this is where I'm going to sign off. I thank you all so much for being here, for all your wonderful questions. And again, you can reach me through my website, wonderscounseling.com, if you want to be in touch further.
Thank you, Lynn. This was wonderful.
All right. You guys have a great rest of your week.
On behalf
Thank
of
you.
On behalf of TPN Health, thank you to Sandstone and Lynn for your discussion today. Just a reminder, attendees, in order to receive your CE certificate, you must complete the post-session evaluation. That will be available in your TPN Health account shortly after the session ends. Thank you for attending.
Bye, everybody.